Hello, I'm Mr. McBrien, and this is Safety in the Computer Engineering Lab. Today we're going to cover the most important aspects of this resource, the Safety Sheets for Secondary School Tech Ed. We're going to talk about the computer lab and talk about the various risks and supports that are available to you in the computer lab. So we'll talk about electricity, and we'll talk about various locations of important items, and we're going to talk about the role of the instructor and the role of the student in the computer engineering lab. Now, this is consistent with the Ontario curriculum. So students are expected to understand health and safety standards and practices associated with computer engineering, and really that's what we're going to cover today. Now, WAS and Ontario and Canada and myself, we all take your safety and that of your classmates very seriously. The good news is, if you follow the classroom safety rules, the risk of an injury in the computer lab is very low. However, if you refuse to follow these safety rules, you will not be allowed to remain in the lab. To put it another way, unsafe behavior in the lab won't be tolerated. Okay, so what kind of dangers do we face? Well, in brief, we work with electricity, of course. There's always the risk in the school of slips and falls. Food and drink represent a specialized risk in the computer lab. We have the potential, of course, for fire, for cuts, and unsafe use of computers represents a risk as well. If you're not sure about what's safe, you need to talk to your instructor before you start work. So let's dig into some of these things in detail. This is a computer power cable. It's a pretty standard piece of equipment, and it carries enough electricity that it could seriously harm or kill a human. First and foremost, don't use damaged power cables. If you can see damage on the power cable, discard it. Replace it with an undamaged cable. Anytime that you see a cable that isn't connected to a device that's plugged into the wall, it represents an unsafe situation. And it needs to be unplugged, and it needs to be stored properly. Now, when you unplug cables, you want to do it using the plastic portion of the plug. Do not pull on the cord. Repeated pulling on the cord will weaken the connection, the electrical connection, and create a fire hazard. And we need to always work together to make sure that the cables that we use aren't a tripping hazard in the classroom. A bit more about electricity. Obviously, computers run on electricity. Their power supplies convert high voltage alternating current to the direct current that the computer can use. And by virtue of this conversion, there's enough power inside a computer to seriously harm you. What this means is you need to unplug your computer before you open up the case and begin to work on it. And it means we never open up this computer power supply case. Even when it's unplugged, a power supply can have enough energy inside it to harm you. So, do not open these cases. Now, if you suspect that one of your classmates, or for that matter your instructor, is being electrocuted, you want to first and foremost don't touch the victim. What you want to do is move to the power cutoff and interrupt the flow of electricity before you help them. And of course, if this occurs, you want to inform your instructor immediately. But touching someone that's in the process of being electrocuted accomplishes nothing. All it does is double the number of victims. Okay, 119B We have the workstations with their independent power cutoff systems. I'd encourage you right now to look at the one in the workstation near you and see where you can cut off the power localized in that area. If you have some kind of a problem, if it's safe to do so, interrupt the power from this local switch. So if you can reach that switch, go ahead and use it. And it'll save us lots of hassles, and of course it's much faster than moving to the main power button. So the emergency power off is actually in the other side of the classroom in 119A. And I'd like you to go and look at that button now. So visually, you should confirm the location of that main cutoff, just in case you can't reach the localized one in case of a problem. All right, a bit more about the inside of a computer. We'll be opening these cases on a regular basis. So this will become a very familiar sight as we're removing the cover from our computers to change out parts, to do troubleshooting, what have you, or just to simply look at and identify the given pieces. When you do so, before you open the case, you should make sure that the computer is unplugged. And even after that, you need to show a bit of care. So the metal edges inside the computer are not treated the same way as outside the computer, and they can be very sharp, and you can cut yourself pretty badly. So you want to be careful when you're putting your hands inside a computer. So food and drink, you'll note that there are signs up inside the classroom saying that food and drink are not allowed. There are several reasons for this, and we might as well go into those now. First is liquids and electricity don't mix. So if we have spills and we have electricity, we have a very dangerous situation. Also, there's always the opportunity for cross-contamination. We use toxic materials in the computer lab. We'll get into that in a bit. And it can never be guaranteed that those are completely cleaned up. And so we don't want to eat because we can wind up cross-contaminating our food or drink. So they're not allowed in the computer lab. And if you must eat or drink during class, you need to move outside the classroom or at the very least to the taped off area. You must not eat or drink inside the classroom at any time. And this includes water bottles. All right. So one of the basic activities in the computer engineering lab is soldering. If we do it properly, it's a very safe activity. There are a few potential hazards associated with soldering, including the toxic solder itself, burns, electrocution, and splashes of molten metal. Now, the most obvious issue we have is that the solder we use in CompEng has a very high lead content. And lead is a long-lasting toxin and should never ever be put inside your body. The biggest thing we can do to avoid a problem, don't eat or drink in the computer engineering lab. But also, don't forget that you're not the only student who sits in your seat. And there may be solder on the tables and things like this, and when you're leaving, your hands have been on that table. Go ahead and wash when you leave the lab. It's just a good practice to use. You may save yourself a nasty flu or cold at the very least, but it'll dramatically reduce the chances of a small amount of lead winding up left on your skin. Now, of course, soldering irons are hot, and for this reason, we need to work with extreme care when we're doing soldering. First off, you need to make sure you have a clear area. Get the backpacks out of the way. Make sure that your classmates are well out of your area so that you have room to move. When you're not using the iron, it needs to go into the holder properly. This is absolutely critical. So the holder is designed to make the extremely hot tip of the soldering iron inaccessible to skin. So go ahead and put it back in the holder as is shown here. Don't forget to tie back your hair. Nobody enjoys the smell of burning hair in the classroom. And also, it's your responsibility to make sure that you turn off the soldering iron when you're done, and make sure that's at least 5 minutes before the end of class. A cold soldering iron looks exactly like a hot soldering iron, and it can be very easy for someone to burn themselves if you leave an extremely hot soldering iron just before you leave the room. You should not leave hot soldering irons unattended. Now also, you want to make sure that you don't touch your project with your bare hands. Again, projects look the same whether they're hot or cold, so if you're just done soldering, you've got to resist the temptation to touch the joins. And one last note, don't forget, never solder a project when it's under power. So make sure you disconnect the power before you start soldering. Okay, a quick note about safety glasses. When you're soldering, there is a small risk of molten solder splashing. In fact, there are some procedures that involve making that solder splash a little bit. Obviously, you want to keep it off of your skin, but you very much want to keep it out of your eyes. So when you're soldering, be sure and wear safety glasses. And while we're at it, be sure to wear safety glasses whenever there's any risk to your eyes. And so that means particularly using power tools, any situation where there's potential for flying debris, you want to make sure you use safety glasses, and there are plenty in the classroom. So another risk inside the computer engineering classroom is the same as in many places in the school, and that is we can have slips and falls quite easily. The good news is that these are very preventable. So no horseplay will be tolerated inside the computer engineering lab. We don't run. Of course, we've already mentioned there's no drinking in the lab, so there's no potential for spills on the floor. And we need to make sure that the aisles are kept free of clutter. And this means that backpacks need to be underneath the desks or stored somewhere else that's safe. Okay, so this leads us to the concept of ladders. We won't use them in the computer engineering classroom. If for some reason you need something that's above what you can reach, talk it over with your instructor. But to be clear, don't climb on the tables or the chairs. First aid kits. There are 2 of them in the lab. I'd encourage you to just have a look around and see where they are. One's by the front door, one's at the front of the classroom beside the printer. If you take anything from the first aid kit, you need to inform your instructor so that it can be replaced. But it's important to note that if you or anyone else in the class is injured, you need to inform your instructor as soon as it's safe to do so. Now, in terms of lifting, it's a good idea for you to know how to lift properly regardless of what happens in the classroom. Now, in the class, don't lift objects that you're not sure you can lift safely. So if there's anything really heavy, and if you think you might need help, be sure and get help. If you have to lift, the correct procedure is to squat with your knees bent, keep your feet apart, keep your back straight. And with your arms straight, get a grip on the load, stand up, keeping your back straight, using your legs. And very important, don't twist or bend your spine while it's under load. Now, when you go to put that object down, of course, you just reverse the process. Ergonomic use of computers. I really think that we're going to find we regret some of the ways that we use our various devices in sort of this generation. I think we're going to find 20 to 30 years from now we're going to suffer a lot of ill effects due to the way that we use our devices today. So the accepted knowledge of how to use a computer these days: be sure to sit up straight, make sure your monitor is just below eye level, be sure that your wrists are straight when using the mouse and keyboard, and adjust your seat height so that your elbows are close to 90 degrees. Very important. Be sure and take breaks. So every little while, get up, walk around. About every 20 minutes, be sure that you look away from your computer. Look at something that's far away to give your eyes a break. We have all been trained in what to do about fire. It's a very unlikely circumstance in our classroom, but now's the time. Visually confirm the location of the fire pole that's outside the classroom, where your fire exit's located, and where the fire extinguisher is for the classroom. It's over by the front door. If you detect a fire, you need to alert your instructor immediately. And if the fire alarm sounds, of course, you need to follow standard WASP procedures. Vacate the building immediately. Electrical fires require a special way to treat them. Obviously, if we have an electrical fire in the classroom, you need to alert your instructor. And if possible, if you can safely cut off the source of electricity, go ahead and do so. If the fire continues, you can use a Type C or ABCD extinguisher, again, if it's safe to approach it. Use of the fire extinguisher is pretty straightforward. You need to pull out the pin, you need to aim low, squeeze the trigger and sweep slowly at the base of the fire, and make sure to stay low to avoid heat and smoke. In general, it's not your job to fight fires in the classroom, and you should let the instructor take care of this, if at all possible. But it's good to know how to use a fire extinguisher in any case. You have information available to you about the materials that you use in the classroom and in any workplace. So the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System is designed to properly label hazardous materials and to give you access to detailed information through material safety data sheets. So anything that you use in the computer engineering lab that has safety implications, you should know that there is an MSDS and there should be a supplier label put on it that give you information. We don't use many hazardous materials in computer engineering, and really solder is the main issue. And again, it's due to the lead content. Now, the sheets for all the materials are contained in the MSDS binder by the entrance to the classroom. You should make sure that you can see where that is now. And you should be aware of the hazardous symbols both inside and outside the classroom. The booklet has a comprehensive list. Here are the most important ones for us. Flammable materials. There isn't much that we have in the classroom, but you should know the symbol for flammable materials. Class C oxidizing materials have a similar symbol with an O incorporated into the symbol. Poisons, no great shock, the symbol there. But you may not be familiar with the Class D Division II symbol for toxic materials. And this is where solder lies. And you can see here, this symbol suggests that the material may cause irritation. Repeated exposure may cause cancer or other permanent damage to health. And that's what class solder is put in for our classroom. And this is why we need to be very cautious with it. Okay, so this is your safety passport for the computer engineering lab. You can see that you will be expected to sign off on the date that you've learned the materials inside the booklet. You'll sign, I will sign, And you'll also need to initial that you've read the safety sheet for that given topic. And you'll be submitting this as part of your documentation to be allowed to work inside the classroom. I've noted that there are a few topics that we don't need to worry about, particularly the pump truck and the CNC router. We don't have those in our classroom. So review these items and be sure you've gone through the booklet. You can sign off when you're sure you understand them. If you have any questions, you need to ask your instructor. And when your passport's complete, you can return it to your teacher. Okay, so to summarize, we achieve safe work in the computer lab primarily by using common sense and acting responsibly. You need to always review the safety policies for a given activity before you start work. And you need to be aware that unsafe behavior will not be tolerated in the computer engineering lab. If you're not sure if something's safe, you need to discuss it before attempting it, not start work and wait for someone to stop you from working in an unsafe manner. Safety is the responsibility of everyone in the computer engineering lab. So for your homework, you need to review the safety data sheets from the safety sheets from the Google Classroom. Submit the personal information survey online, again from Google Classroom. Return the signed consent form and complete the online safety test. And then you'll be cleared to work inside the computer engineering lab. That's all for today. Thanks very much, and best wishes for safe work in the lab. Thank you.